It's a classic writer problem. How do you find the time to write and balance that with the time to read? I don't know about you guys, but when I became a writer, I found that this was incredibly difficult. So, in this video, we're going to talk about balancing writing and reading. What's up, guys? Michael Laron here with Author Level Up, helping you write world-class stories better and faster. And I create these writing videos because I believe that each of you has Stephen King level talent, and you just need help unlocking it. So if you're new here, consider subscribing and click that little bell, ding, 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 to get notifications every time I have a new writing video. And in this writing video, we're talking about balancing writing and reading. And this video is part of my organization series where we're talking about how to approach and organize virtually every area of the writing life in order to stack the decks in your favor so you can be more successful. So I struggle with finding that balance between writing and reading. And before I became a writer, I was a super avid reader. I mean, I was always at the library. I was always reading a new book. I mean, I read several books a week, and it was never an issue. But when I became a writer, I just felt like a switch flipped. Like suddenly, I wanted to read, but at the same time, like if I'm going to have a career as a writer, I need to be writing words. And so I found myself in these weird situations where, well, I've got an hour left this evening. Do I read the next chapter in this book that I was reading, or do I write the next chapter in this book that I'm writing? And I found that it's just a struggle that just never went away. And personally, if I could just wave my magic wand tomorrow, I would spend half my day writing and half my day reading. But, I kind of have things like a job and a family and classes in the evenings. So how do I find the time? So my answer depends on the year, literally, because I feel like this answer in my strategy to this, I feel like it changes and it evolves every 6 to 8 months. There's no one size fits all solution. Everything has kind of changed in my writing life and in my personal life. And so when those things change, I found that my reading habits and my writing habits also tend to change. So in 2012, when I first started deciding that I wanted to be a writer, the primary way that I was reading was on ebook. So right around 2011, 2012 or so, I said in my reading life, I'm just not going to read paperback books anymore. And it's not because I don't like paperback books. I actually love paperback books, and I have an entire bookshelf full of my favorite paperbacks, but I was finding that it was too difficult to take them with me anywhere. So if I wanted to read, when I was at the mall or something, or it just didn't feel good to have to carry a paperback around with me. And there are just other logistical issues of paperbacks. And so I said, I'm going to switch to reading exclusively on Kindle. So if a book is not available on Kindle, I'm just not going to read it. And so I had a Kindle, and I used that, and then I started reading on my phone. And so I switched to ebooks as my primary method of reading because my life was constantly on the go. And so reading ebooks was the only way that I could find time to read books. Now, this was before I started writing on my phone. So whenever I had an opportunity, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, I was reading books because that was really the only thing I could do on my phone other than be on the internet. And when I became a writer, that was the same thing because, like I said, I didn't have writing apps on my phone back then. So in 2014, another way that I tried to keep reading and keep up on my reading was I challenged myself. So I actually had a podcast. It was called the To Be Read podcast. I co-hosted it with my friends Patrick Stemp and Jamie Maltman. And what we did was every week we talked about books. We talked about the books that we were reading, and we did nearly 100 episodes. And I'll link to it in the video description because all the videos are still live on YouTube. You can literally see. I mean, we were all three writers. we were writers very early on in our careers, and we knew the importance of reading books because that's how you learn how to be a writer, right? Is by reading books. And so I challenged myself, and for almost 2 years, every week I had something that I was reading. But eventually, that podcast, we went our separate ways. We all three of us had careers that we were trying to pursue, and it just didn't make sense to continue doing it anymore. And so that's when my reading kind of fell off the wayside. So the podcast, I think, ended in like 2015. So 2016, 2017, they weren't very good years for me from a reading perspective. I mean, I maybe read 10 books per year. I mean, it was just pathetic. But those were my most productive writing years. I mean, in 2017, I wrote like 11 novels, So it's like this it's like this sliding scale. And I still couldn't write on my phone. And I keep mentioning this because it's important. So right around this time, around 2016, 2017, is when I started to say, okay, I'm not reading enough, and I'm starting to feel it, right? My creative well is starting to run empty on occasion. And so I said, how do I fix this problem? How do I make sure that I'm constantly filling that creative well and making sure that I'm consuming content? Because I found that the amount of content I consume directly correlates to how deep my creative well is. I think that's pretty simple. So I said, okay, it's harder for me to read on the go. It's harder for me to write on the go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start investing in audiobooks because I spend a lot of my time listening to podcasts already. When I'm going to work or when I'm doing chores or when I'm doing the lawn, I'm listening to podcasts. So I said, okay, what if I listen to fewer podcasts and then listen to more audiobooks? And so right around this time was when I went hardcore into an Audible subscription. I paid for the platinum membership where you get 2 credits a month. And so I was listening to audiobooks faster than my credits were. So I was basically spending a lot of money on audiobooks, but I was getting through books really, really fast. And then another thing I found, and this is just a weird quirk that I have. I don't necessarily know that it'll work for you, but I listen to my audiobooks at 2 or 3 times speed. So, they sound like chipmunks, but it's okay. My wife looks at me weird every time I have an audiobook going when I'm doing a chore or something. But, it's helpful because it helps me get through the books faster. And I found that, over time, you kind of get used to the speed. Now, there's some types of books where I won't listen to them at 2 or 3 times speed. But most books I actually will because all I care about is the story. And ultimately, all I care about is the technique. There are great audiobook narrators that I love, and I will listen to them at times 1. But for the most part, I listen to my stuff pretty quick. And I found that helps me because when you listen to audiobooks, it doesn't compete with your writing time. That's the great thing about audiobooks. When you're listening to an audiobook, you're probably doing something else. You're not writing. And so I found that is a great way to squeeze in additional reading time. And audiobooks became especially important for me when I started writing on my phone. So here's where I was going with this. So before I adopted Scrivener iOS and Ulysses, I was reading on my phone. When I had those blocks of 5 to 10 minutes at a time, I'd just pull up the book I was reading and I would read it. But when I started writing on Scrivener, that went away like overnight because I was like, oh, I can write. I'm at the doctor's office. I can write a chapter. So what do I do when faced with writing a chapter so you can finish a book and publish it and make money versus reading a chapter? It's a pretty simple choice, but then again, like I said, it just keeps morphing and it becomes this problem over and over again. And audiobooks is the one thing that I found that does not compete with that. And so that's why I have gone gung-ho into audiobooks. Now, I still read ebooks on a regular basis, but audio is primarily how I consume my content these days. So then the question is, well, how do I find that time to read, right? Because you're probably experiencing the same issues as I am, and maybe audiobooks is not the solution for you. I would just say to think about the times of the day where you can reclaim reading time, right? So if you don't write on the go like I do, if you don't have a hectic lifestyle like I do right now, then maybe reading is a little bit easier for you, right? But if you do have kind of the lifestyle that I have, or you're busy, or you've got kids, or you've got things that are constantly competing for your time and your attention, then maybe you do look for those pockets of time throughout the day where you can say, I'm just going to dedicate this hour I have per day or this 30 minutes I have per day toward reading the next book that I'm trying to read. But like I said, this is just, it's something that I guess I've struggled with, and I'm going to continue to struggle with it. I think it'll be better if, if and when I can become a full-time writer. I think it'll be a lot easier to find that time to write. But for now, it's just a constant struggle. So I want to hear from you guys. What are your tips? How do you find time to read throughout the day, and how do you find that balance between writing and reading? I would love to hear from you guys and how you tackle this problem. So drop me a comment below and let me know. And if this is your first time watching, be sure to subscribe. And don't forget to watch the rest of the videos in my organization series. I'll talk to you guys later.